Hello everyone, welcome back to the show. Last episode, we took a deep dive into the world of hydration, hacks, and habits. We discussed the undervalued topic of hydration and took you through a little trip down memory lane of the conversation around fluid consumption and how marketing products like Gatorade and Powerade changed the landscape of health and fitness forever. The episode provides valuable strategies and information to guide you through how to apply better hydration habits into your life. If you're new here, this is the Strength in Motion Show, an audio experience to bring education about helping you bring functional fitness and better routines into your life. We are a 24/7 gym based out of Midvale, Western Australia, and our goal is to make functional fitness practical and achievable for people who want to lift, move, and feel better without the classic boring and egotistical gym nonsense. If you do intend on lifting and moving better, well, you better start learning. If you want to get your head around the functional way more, you can start at the beginning of our podcast series of episodes 1 to 5, in which we outline the foundational pillars of movement, nutrition, sleep, and stress. Our YouTube channel is our next destination, with lessons and videos curated to further support your understanding on how you can train properly towards your goals. Today's episode is about the debate between functional training and traditional strength training, such as bodybuilding and powerlifting. As gym owners and coaches, we can see there is a large division between which training style is superior, and we believe that a unified hybrid model is the way forward. Both sides of the argument offer great value, and therefore we should be striving for a way to take the best of both worlds and give birth to a new and more modern approach to movement and lifting. The modern world is full of short-term videos and short-form videos with everyone yelling their points into a phone screen. As per a 2024 psychological study, the average American user scrolls 300 feet a day. That is 91 meters and the same height as the Statue of Liberty. Most of our brains are completely scrambled with the overload of information, and subsequently so are our opinions and understanding of the fitness world. This episode is dedicated to helping you gain clarity on your training. Before we delve into things, we should be welcoming to the mic Navar, the co-host.
Hello, hello.
How are you?
Good. I'm hopeful I don't scroll 91 meters a day.
I reckon I do. I've had I've done some marathon scrolls.
That's wild. I love how it's put into that perspective.
Yeah.
That's absolutely crazy.
Because when I researched that, I was trying to find out the time.
Yeah.
How long people, and then it came up with like 10 minutes a day, and I'm like, bullshit.
No way.
And then I got this. It literally was published. I think August, October last year.
Wow.
And it was mostly Americans that was being studied, and that's why it was used in feet and Statue of Liberty. But I have seen the Statue of Liberty, and it's big.
Yeah.
Thank
you, French.
And a phone screen's thanks, French. Phone screen's not that big.
Yeah.
So
Wild.
Anyway, what's going on, Nav?
A whole lot. It was funny writing this. We did have a conversation prior to this about setting aside dedicated time to relax, and every single time I go into or I talk about how I'm doing, or when people ask me, the first thing that tends to come to mind is business. Business does drive a lot of my life and a lot of your life as well. But I wanted to talk about how excited I am for Japan.
Yeah, boy.
Which is awesome. So last year we committed, Ocean and I, to having a 4-week holiday at the end of the year, realizing that we were taking maybe 1 week, 2 weeks here and there, if 2 weeks. And it was nice, but it wasn't enough dedicated time to really settle into relaxing and then embracing the relaxation. So the 4 weeks off last year was a bit of a game changer for me. It was really nice to identify where I might be stressed or overwhelmed and find some relaxation and give myself that time. And then this year, Ocean and I are now going to Japan for 21 days, but we'll take 4 weeks off holiday, so we have a week to settle back in before work. But the reason why it's relevant now, although it's like 6 months out from us going, is it just gives us something to be really excited for. On top of that, we're going to do another big trip next year to Europe. We'll do it end of year as well. And then we're going to start having children. So it's kind of like, although we're going to Japan, it also is like a stepping stone towards, having these experiences together as a couple, but then starting our new family together. So
that's very exciting.
Extremely exciting. New energy in my life, and I look forward to it.
Yeah, that's cool.
What about yourself?
Speaking of new energy, I've got now an 11-month-year-old puppy.
Wow,
she's
a lot of energy.
Yeah, she's cracked 30 kilos, so she's a big girl too. But she's making progress. She's honestly, outside of destroying everything and anything, she's making progress, and it's teaching me a lot about just patience of growth as well, because I can get I guess I get quite self-critical, and I tend to believe that results can happen faster than they can happen.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me, like, it's very similar to how I train clients and managing expectations. It's the same thing. I've been managing my own expectations a lot smoothly now, and it's been really helping. And what's also interesting is I'm using a second dog trainer, and both of their opinions are highly opposing. And so I still get stuck in the middle of like not knowing what to do, because I'm like, oh, well, this trainer said this, but then this trainer said this. And I've been doing a lot of really just trusting my instincts and trusting my gut again. And ultimately it's consistency that's paying off. So I'm very pleased that I'm navigating that overwhelm of information as well, which is ironic because we're going to be talking about navigating the overwhelm of information and opinions and everything, and just how to take action still when being confused as well. A lot of similarities when I was putting this podcast info together as well. And but yeah, Millie's going well, and that's really the main priority in my life right now, is just making sure that I'm being a good role model for her, and then having a dog that I can take everywhere. And she's not ready to be taken everywhere yet, but we will get there. So look, and also I want to say I have been training a lot less the last maybe like month and a half, just so I can prioritize like being consistent with Millie and being consistent with my job role. But despite that, my PB muscle mass, I'm at a PB muscle mass from training less, which I think is more so just from running less, so that I'm not just like chewing through. I'm not having to eat as many calories to just sustain myself. Now I can eat calories to nourish and grow the muscle mass, and so it's been good. I'm very pleased with that. Did you do that? You got
yes,
that?
I've got
sweet.
both.
Do you want to drop a hint for your mystery item?
I think I will. My hint will be. I want to give a good enough hint. It'll swim by when the time comes.
That sounds, well, I don't know what that is. But that sounds very cryptic.
Yeah. I don't want to give too much away.
I don't know how to be cryptic.
Just tell us what it is now.
Equipment. Stuff. I brought a stuff. That's all we've got.
Nice teaser.
Yeah. Okay. So today we're talking effectively about the debate between bodybuilding and powerlifting, which are what most traditional, what most gyms are culturally built around, providing equipment to suit goals that come from that mindset and that style of training, and then really the open world of functional training, because functional training is very confusing in itself, because people don't even coaches aren't able to clearly define what is function. And function for one thing is actually dysfunctional for another thing. And so now there's an argument of like what's more important as well, what to train towards. So we'll be discussing all of those, and we're going to get into it. Like most people, our fitness journey starts with us feeling inadequate in some manner. We are usually driven to the gym for three following reasons. Number one, we don't like the way we look in the mirror. Number two, we don't like the way we feel about ourselves. And number three, we don't like how stiff, sore, and lethargic our body is. Caveat number, I didn't write this, but the fourth is usually there's some health-related issue that the doctor's like, you got to go to the gym. That's usually the fourth one, is a thing happens. But those three reasons are really the most common reasons why people set foot into the gym or start their fitness journey. Psychology and history tells us that body image is directly linked to social status and therefore survival. If we go back in the times, back in the historic book, tribespeople would often decorate themselves with body paint and masks to look more threatening. Leaders would wear animal skins and jewelry to show status. And even going forward through Renaissance times, we saw clothing and armor with widened shoulders to look more powerful, and corsets making the waist seem thinner and petite. Through generations, women have flashed their skin. Woo! Men have picked their chests up as we all fight for a sense of acceptance in the community around us. This mindset is primal and will continually play out for generations to come. For myself, I joined the gym as a teenager to feel more attractive to women and to fight back at the guys who were hitting puberty and growth spurts before me, and they would push me around in the sporting field. Navar, can you share a story of how you started with fitness and your mindset coming into the space and how that's evolved to this day?
Beautiful. Well, I'll start from the very beginning. I started in exercise at a very young age with like karate, Muay Thai, because my dad was a fighter. So I was very much active in that, playing soccer, playing AFL, playing, Gaelic football. I was very active in every sport that was just available to me at school. Never really committed to one or the other. I did some like soccer tournaments and stuff like that, but I couldn't even remember. I was one of the sort of people that just showed up and did whatever and just went along with it. But besides karate and Muay Thai, where I did compete in certain comps, that was basically all I competed in. But then as I got older and I started going to the gym at about 16, that was mostly because of a confidence thing. I was quite lean, and although somewhat athletic, I wasn't happy the way I looked. I wanted to, I guess, be more domineering. Funny enough, as we talked, I wanted my chest to really pop out, so people really took me serious. I felt like people weren't taking me serious.
Yeah.
Ironically, when I turned 19, I gained 14 kilos in 10 weeks, and that was a massive transformation. However, I didn't really instantly view myself any differently. I think... Well, now the understanding of, yes, I could change my external, but it's also the way I hold myself, the way I feel about myself, the energy I put out externally, that it determines how serious someone might take me, or the conversations I have with people. Where I thought, hey, if I'm jacked, people will just love me and think I'm the best. That was a big lesson. But I think that one of the biggest changes which kind of dives into the conversation we're having today, was I did that bodybuilding, powerlifting until I was about 28. So probably about 16 to 28. A lot of that time I didn't do a whole lot of Muay Thai. I still did a bit, but not a crazy amount. Didn't really take it serious. Most of my energy moved towards weightlifting. And it started in the big bodybuilding era. Mostly read books, bodybuilding.com forums, and that's where a lot of the information came out. And by the time I was, 28, I started getting back into Muay Thai, and I was absolutely gobsmacked by how dysfunctional I was in that way, although I was very functional in powerlifting. Like you mentioned, I gained so much function and strength in powerlifting and bodybuilding, and I was doing really well in that space. But then when I had to move back into Muay Thai, which demanded a whole nother function from my body, that was a massive eye-opener.
Yeah.
And also very hard as someone that was identified as being strong and muscular, to then reduce that and change that space. That was hard. That was very hard.
Yeah, that's very challenging.
Yeah.
I relate. I was in that as well. I came back from... I was always in sporting, which was good, played sport my whole life, but my insecurities got the better of me. And when I started, I was literally just doing bodybuilding training. Because again, like the people I would speak to were guys that were lifting already, that had just been following whatever. They were just copying whoever they felt like, and it was just copying. And the whole industry was built around just being aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I chased that to a degree where I was actually ended up becoming a male stripper, because I trained hard and my sporting taught me to bring intensity. So when I hit the weights, I hit it with intensity. And I did get stronger, and that did help, but my hips were just so locked up, and my hip mobility was really, really struggling, and ended up like tearing my hamstring. I had lots of ankle injuries as well, lots of calf injuries, like micro tears in the calves as well. And I just couldn't understand why I was getting so injured. And a lot of the guys, that they just assume that because they get into their late 20s, it's old age. And that was wrong. That was a lie. I thought that was true. And especially when you're in sporting, people consider you old when you're still in your 20s and when you're in your late 20s. And luckily I had the gym, which I moved my focus towards the gym, which caused me to start training people. And then that space wanted me to trigger me to start learning more and researching more, and going into anatomy was really where things started to get clear for me, because anatomy taught me to work based on function, because I'm like, why is my shoulder fucked? Why can I not, I wanted to have big shoulders, so I trained shoulders. And then the having that time of learning how the shoulder girdle is put together, it helped me understand how to train for it properly. And that led me to realize that all of my training was like really dysfunctional. And as I made my return to running and ultramarathon running, I was still riddled with all these hamstring and calf issues. And it wasn't until I started doing more unilateral training, rotation training, and training more for qualities like training for mobility, training for speed, training for agility again. Once I started bringing those qualities back into my training, I was able to become essentially more functional, whereas my training was more built around how I wanted myself to look. I wanted this shirt to be tighter, and I wanted these pants to fit differently. I wanted my butt to pop and my quads to stick out, and it just was a dead end. And it was the same dead end for all the guys I stripped with as well. They have a lot of them started seeing me for PT for those reasons. So that was a very fascinating journey as well. Thanks for sharing, Nav. Now, some of you who are listening, you might not even understand what the difference between bodybuilding and powerlifting is, and you might not even understand what the definition of functional training is. So, Nav, can you just explain to me first, what is the difference between bodybuilding and powerlifting? What's the difference there?
So bodybuilding is more towards the body composition and the shaping of the body, right? So it's like the perfect example is you have clay, you have an artist that has clay, and then the artist would chip away at the clay, creating a statue underneath. And that's kind of how bodybuilders will see their body, is they're exercising to create symmetry and certain muscle mass in certain areas to make it look a certain way, like a statue on a stage, because bodybuilding competitively is on the stage, showing off their body. So that's bodybuilding. Powerlifting is strength based. It's maximum strength. And so it's your squat, bench, deadlift, and they're your big competition lifts that you'll do at a powerlifting meet. And most of our programming done today, especially through the social media space, is very much driven by bodybuilding and powerlifting. So very driven by aesthetics and strength.
Yeah, and to add to that, bodybuilding and powerlifting, they're both really muscle building practices. Even for the women, for women it's referred to as toning, but it's the same concept. Men tend to pursue that hourglass physique, where they're going for the wide shoulders, the muscular legs, but then that really thin waist. And then when they pose on stage, they try and stand on specific angles and kind of side on to the audience, so that their shoulders again look wider, the waist looks thinner, and then the legs start to bow out again. For women, they tend to pursue the petite upper body with the lean and toned arms, which again needs muscle to get that lean and toned look, as well as the flat stomach and the thick butts and thighs. It's just, as a summary, it's heavily focused around what we call hypertrophy training. Hypertrophy training is muscle building training, and this is where people tend to chase the pump and that muscle soreness in order to contour the body. But there's a little value on some certain things. Do you want to tell me what that little value is, Nav?
Yeah, so for quite some time, there was the myth that cardio is going to kill your gains. Yeah. And that's still very prominent within that space. Also, it is somewhat true to a degree,
It
right?
is, yeah.
And so they're going to sacrifice cardio because they're not going to value it as much as hypertrophy muscle gaining. So very little cardio within the space, and then also little value in mobility. They're just completely fixated on muscle building. They're not so much consumed in how they perform, unless it's just to try and they could change up exercises to isolated muscle groups. So they're not so fixated on a overall complete mobility within their body.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well said. And there's also high value on nutrition, which is something that I do love about I love that about bodybuilding. Powerlifting, there's not as much of powerlifting. There's probably a high value on Red Bull and Monster
energy and
caffeine.
Just caffeine.
Because it's more stressful on the nervous system, because powerlifting involves just like pure strength training, heavy lifting, and therefore caffeine makes the
things I used to do on powerlifting. There was you would have Pepsi Max, which has caffeine in it, and you would put pre-workout in it.
Jesus.
And you would drink that as your pre-workout, and then intra-workout you would have a BCA, so like a branched chain amino acid supplement, and then you will be snacking on lollies. You'll be having lollies throughout the intra-workout, just so you get sugar, you get a pump during the workout. You'll have Pop-Tarts. You'll do all sorts of dumb shit in powerlifting.
I forgot about Pop-Tarts. I used to love Pop-Tarts.
Yeah, they popped off for a while though.
Is that a pun?
Oh, yeah. It was intentional.
I used to smash Pop-Tarts. Could you just whack them in the toaster?
Yeah.
And then I used to burn them all the time because I was just not that intelligent as a kid. You just assume that the toaster was set the correct setting. And then you just turn it on. And anyway, one thing this is more of a trade-off, a negative trade-off, is that almost all training is done in the sagittal plane for bodybuilding and powerlifting. So the sagittal plane is one of the, how do you describe it in layman's terms? If you were to slice the body in half, you can slice the body in top to bottom, you can slice the body in front to back, and you can slice the body to left and right. So when we're analysing movement or anatomy, those are those terms, those movement planes that coaches and therapists learn about. So the sagittal plane separates the left and the right. which means when you're moving in the sagittal plane, you're actually moving forward to back. So movements that are common for the sagittal plane is everything that's in bodybuilding and powerlifting, such as your squats, your benches, your deadlifts, most of your general machines that you use, I'm trying to think of machines now, pec deck, all the shoulder press, all the rowing machines, they're all what is called a bilateral movement. Leg extension, hamstring curl, calf raises, they're all sagittal plane movements, and they are fine when we're moving at low speeds and when we're holding all these poses for bodybuilding, or we're actually doing these really strict muscular based movements in powerlifting, like a squat, bench, and deadlift in competition. But what you can notice, and this is something that I notice or not, maybe the listeners might not notice this or not a lot, but you can just spot a bodybuilder or a powerlifter a mile away when you're looking at how people walk. Bodybuilders and powerlifters unfortunately tend to waddle a lot because their torsos do not rotate. And a lot of it comes from training the thin waist. When you are going for a thin waist, and I was reminded about this about a client that I picked up recently, who was an ex-client of Nick from Worlds. And Nick's actually a friend of ours, and he's a very successful bodybuilder, and he is fucking huge. When you see him, he's like, I call him the Michelin Man because he's just so jacked. And I bumped into him recently, and he was just prepping for a show, and he was still huger than ever. But what was fascinating is when I was talking to the client, this new guy who was an ex-bodybuilding client, and he still follows the bodybuilding protocol. When I did his movement assessment, I was like, dude, we actually need to do a lot of oblique work because you're not rotating very well when you move. And he was like, man, I don't think I've trained obliques in years. And I'm like, why not? And he goes, well, it just makes the waist thicker, because you go from having that tapered effect where the shoulders are wide and it's like an upside down triangle down to the waist. You get that when you avoid training obliques, which are the sides of your core. And most of the bodybuilding training is again sagittal plane core movements, which is crunches, sit-ups, leg raises, knee raises, and that's what I did a lot as well. Even when I was training for sport, I just wanted a six-pack, so I was just like crunch after crunch after crunch, and to a degree they help, but if that's the only type of core training, and that's what contributed to me having such a locked up pelvis and really poor hip mobility that took a very long time to unwind. Whereas as we now segue to functional training, when we saw the introduction of CrossFit, which was a big influence on the functional training term and the functional training world, we started to see these more barrel-torsoed athletes coming through the mix. But what we also saw was people really liked it. People liked that aesthetic, and people just saw these massive, massive guys and girls that were like throwing these really heavy weights around, but then like doing rope climbs and double unders and skipping and massive amounts of burpees, and they were dripping with sweat. And it really brought a new aesthetic, effectively, that people started to chase, and it really helped, just the likes of core training start to evolve back to really, in our opinion, what it should be. So when we are talking about functional training, there is a focus on being fast, explosive, and mobile in conjunction with being muscular. And the goal is to be muscular without the deficit of your performance as well. So we generally see that when people are talking about bodybuilding, powerlifting, and building muscle, they're building a lot of muscle. Whereas when people are in the functional training space, when they say they're trying to build muscle, they're still trying to build a decent amount of muscle, but they're not trying to be massive, and they're not trying to walk through doors sideways, unless they're small doors, because sometimes it might feel good to feel large every now and then. But with functional training, we still see a lot of the traditional strength training movements that we see from bodybuilding and powerlifting, those traditional strength movements. But then what we see, there's a big mix with a lot of the single-legged, the stability, and the balance exercises. What else can you tell me about functional training, Nav? What do you want to add to that?
Yeah, well, you mentioned it really well, that they're still muscular, right? But without the stiff and slowness. And I think it's because they're training around movements and dynamic exercises that improve a larger array of exercises or movements, right? So a lot of them would be doing running, jumping, rolling, sides, like lateral movements, even climbing, for instance. So the muscle that they're building is a byproduct of these certain movements. So they're building muscle while also improving their movement patterns in other areas where powerlifting and bodybuilding are very sagittal plane, like Josh mentioned, and only bilateral. So they're gaining muscle, but they're also not exploring certain movements that allow them to be more functional, which is where what we're talking about is functional, right?
Yeah.
Like the argument, some people say, well, a squat is functional. Yes, to a degree, but we're talking about function that involves the whole entire biomechanical body, where we're able to run and jump and move laterally, rotate, twist, all those sort of stuff. So that's a big difference. It's also influenced by athletes like sprinters, basketball players, NFL players. For me, martial artists.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So MMA fighters are a big one because they're a mix of movement. They're doing wrestling, jiu-jitsu, they're striking. And so their ability to move is fantastic. And that's what I'm biased towards the most. But it still looks athletic, but also performing at a high level.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to add that there's a couple of pieces of equipment that have confused the functional training landscape as well, because I remember that it went viral. There's a video of LeBron, and he was like kneeling on not a Bosey ball, on a fit ball. He was kneeling on a fit ball, and I think he was holding a kettlebell, and he was like spinning it around, and his coach was just standing there and coaching him, and it kicked an uproar off, because a lot of people started doing movements like that because LeBron James was doing them, but people trying to chase the aesthetic of the athlete were then doing the athletic based exercises. And then there was an even argument about whether that specific exercise was even a good exercise or not as well, and the specificity of whether that was practical or not. And there had to be some level of logic if some coach at that level was doing that with an athlete. But what has been really funny as well with the introduction of new pieces of equipment in the functional space is things like the suspension trainer, which is also known as a TRX. Suspension trainer is effectively a glorified set of Olympic rings. It's just two handles on a strap that you can hang. But then there was a lot of the high intensity and the circuit work that came in, that a lot of funny looking exercises came from using that piece of equipment, which I assume were just done by the marketing team to just say, well, you can have a complete workout with this piece of equipment. But then all these other exercises that were kind of unnecessary started to come into the mix. And we also had the Bosey balls and other fitness tools, like the little balancing things, which in certain applications, they have a really good, they give good results, and they really help the person work on maybe a specific deficit in their mobility or stability, but they do get taken out of hand a lot and out of context, and you get views on the internet when you do that. But that's also confused the landscape on what is functional and what is actually valuable as well. And that's what we're going to be talking about as well. Is there anything you want to add before we move on to like really breaking things down and getting into the deep dive, Nav?
I think that pretty much covers it. I think we got a good amount to dive into, which will help us move forward.
And I'm excited to do it. So we're going to do a little camera reset, and then we're going to get into breaking down bodybuilding and functional training even further. We're going to do our mystery sound.
Volume up.
Volume up. Yeah,
right.
Go and hit it.
Should we go first?
Yeah. Oh, that's blank. Okay.
Right.
Number
Next
2.
I just like anime, and I love
these are the
Pokemon,
same.
and I like being here.
All right, well,
that was alright. That
I'll go
wasn't
with
a
that. I
swear
like
word
anime
anyway.
and Pokemon, yeah.
Yeah, I liked a bit of that when I was young. I liked Pokemon. So, delving into bodybuilding, we mentioned a few of these things before. Bodybuilding as a mindset starts from the individual will look at their physique or their contours or their reflection in the mirror, and then they'll make decisions on how their training program is put together based on what they want to get bigger or larger or reshape. And so, for example, one of our coaches, Sophie, she was doing her bodybuilding comp, and I was talking to her about how her program was going. And when we were working together, and I was teaching her some things that I knew, I was pointing out to her body that we needed to work on some like upper thoracic, some rotation, some spinal work, right? And she was like, I can't put that in my program right now. And I'm like, why can't you put that in the program right now? And she's like, well, I need to get my delts bigger, because based on what the feedback she was getting from her coach was that she was just too thin in the upper body, and then she was putting all this effort into reshaping her shoulders. But what that was creating is the issue that I was trying to bring up to her. And I'm like, you have this shoulder issue and this shoulder pain and this like neck tension and neck pain because you're so focused on so you're so unfocused on the mobility side of things. And we ended up just having to come to an agreement that she was just going to have to deal with the pain, because in that moment her priority was the aesthetic development of her upper body. So that's what we're talking about here when it comes to bodybuilding. And we actually personally see that as somewhat of a negative thing, because we also found that with a more functional approach to training, you can still achieve those aesthetic goals, especially with good nutrition management and sleep management, obviously, while still training for good qualities like strength and muscle gain and mobility and stability as well. So what are some of the common misconceptions, Nav, with the bodybuilding that we kind of want to address?
In regards to like how people view bodybuilding or what they think of it?
More so like the bro science and stuff, and how people are it's very easy to jump to conclusions, because someone might see, for example, that by consuming a certain food, they would then see themselves as larger, but in actual fact, they're just holding onto lots of water, for example. And they're actually, the common ones, people being inflamed as well. Yeah. Remember when people used to drink tons of milk? And it's just this, what I'm getting at is the jumping to conclusions, and people like really basing things off, I guess, anecdotal evidence rather than, I guess, any other science-backed resource.
Yeah. So misconceptions around eating certain foods.
Yeah, and just eating a lot. Just eating to be bigger is really what I'm getting towards, because
people have those beliefs. We're talking about what the people believe. Okay.
I was trying to allude to how you had your when you started swallowing lots of food and practicing eating more just to get massive.
Yeah. That also, that, you know, you need to be on anabolic steroids come to mind, you know, so supplementation, steroids, certain foods that people need to be eating, or like you mentioned, with Sophie, like staying away from certain movements, you know, and the inability to be mobile and strong at the same time. Which brings up like Juju Mufu. Yeah. Well, who's extremely mobile, but also absolutely jacked. And it's definitely possible. There's so many people that have achieved that as well. The misconception that you can't achieve both, be mobile and muscular bound at the same time. You know, not being able to wipe your bum or touch your back while having that amount of muscle. It's certainly, as you move into more of a space, it definitely makes you more dysfunctional in others. So if you're putting a lot of effort into hypertrophy and muscle building, the amount of mobility you would need to do outside of that definitely corresponds with it. So you're doing a tremendous amount of weightlifting, then you probably had to meet it with mobility. Only if you're not doing like a mixed program, which is like for Sophie's situation, or like James Street, when I was training him, we had to really focus on, like, depending on when we really dive into bodybuilding, you're also looking at the anatomy. So it's also the genetics of the body and how it's built determines how you also train it. So so he was very fixated in a certain way of training and not so open to another, but they had to make those sacrifices because they wanted to compete in something.
Correct. And I actually personally enjoy that part of bodybuilding, how it becomes very much of an art form, and you get to really dive really deeply into anatomy to a degree, because you are trying to shape the body and contour it in a certain way, and it brings a lot of self-expression out as well. The other misconception that I wanted to address, I don't know if it's a misconception, but it's more around the heavy use of machines. Bodybuilding workouts are very isolated focused, and they're very focused on trying to target one specific muscle. And so bodybuilding workouts tend to differ from functional workouts, because bodybuilding sessions have lots of isolation work and they have lots of machine work. And what the trade-off is that is a faster way to get to imbalances, and what is an issue with the bodybuilding side of things, and I suppose in general, people think they can get results faster than what they actually anticipate. And then what happens is, when they start getting these deficits in their mobility, what happens, they have to then start doing extra prehab work or rehab work and extra mobility work, and that becomes very time consuming and just adds a lot of extra stress to people. Whereas once you have a more, I guess, intelligent way of training, you can find ways to work on your mobility and stability kind of at the same time with training. What was you were saying the other day about Eugene Teo? He was talking about how the industry is still so heavily focused on bodybuilding, and it's going to take a while. Was he saying it's going to take a while? What was he addressing there?
Yeah. So Eugene Teo,
I don't know.
Yeah. You should know.
Yeah, I should. Asian brother.
Asian, yeah. He's absolutely look up to him in the fitness space, because he comes from a bodybuilding background, but he's transitioned quite well into, he's a very curious man. He's always constantly learning and absorbing, and he's carried over now into more functional training and stepping outside of the bilateral movements. But I think it was on his story. I couldn't really find the post, so I think it was on his story. But he talked about how hard it was for him to separate from the bodybuilding style training because that's what he was so attached to for so long. And it's also what, in his words, 99% of the influencer space and what's on social media is still derived from these certain, which we'll dive into, sets and reps, type of volume and type of exercises. A lot of the programming that's still out there by coaches and even just in the fitness space is derived by old school bodybuilding style programming and training.
Yeah, and let's talk about it. Let's talk about what a common training week actually looks like, which if you're listening, you've been at the gym, you've probably heard of these phrases, or you've probably heard of these terms, or the, I guess, arrangements of like bodybuilding splits, or a common question in the bodybuilding space is, what's your split? And that refers to how are you laying out your training throughout the week. The key thing about a common training week for bodybuilding is that training programs are focused around which region of the body to train. So you generally find that you have, a common one is a 5-day split. So a 5-day split means you're training 5 days and you're splitting your whole body across those 5 days. And so you may have heard of terms like chest and tries. That's usually on a Monday. Depending on the person and their schedule, you have chest and tries, back and bis, then you have a glute and abs day, and then you have an arms and shoulders day, and then you have another quads and abs day. So people tend to just say, more like a butt day and then more of a quad day, which I've been through that as well when it's worked, and I used to do one where, so commonly chest and tries are done together and back and biceps are done together, but I used to switch it, so I'd do chest and bis, and then I would do back and tries, which was a little mix up as well, I guess a little modern flair. Nice. What about 4 and 3 day splits?
Yeah, so the 4-day split will be something like a push-pull day, so upper body push, upper body pull, and then you'll have a quad dominant leg day and a hip dominant leg day, which is the glutes and the hamstrings. And the 3-day split will be something upper body push, upper body pull, and a leg day. Yeah. Which is still so crazy that people do these splits. Because I remember when I was bodybuilding like 10 years ago, there was Ben Schoenfeld and a lot of information coming out about the differences between intensity and frequency, and also whether you're on anabolic steroids or not. And a lot of these programs, like doing a 5-day split where you do chest once a week, or you do biceps once a week, back once a week, and you have these specific days, when you're not anabolically enhanced, so if you're not taking steroids, the anabolic window only lasts up to 72 hours and it peaks at 48. And so if you're not an enhanced athlete, or, individual, then you're missing out on hitting each muscle group 2 to 3 times a week. But people still follow these old school bodybuilding splits, which I think is just another thing to what Eugene was saying. Like, all this information is just still what people are catching onto. It's easy to follow what has worked to a degree, but it isn't the most effective.
Yeah, correct. And it's a great point of these enhanced athletes, as we call, because those are ones we tend to idolize the most, and then therefore we try and, people who aren't enhanced try and train like an enhanced athlete, and that just sets up, that's a very poor foundation to build from. The other common one is the Sunday cheat day as well.
I used to froth that.
Yeah, I used to love it as well. I don't live like that anymore. But effectively, you do your 5 to 6 days a week, and you really adhere to your macronutrients and your nutrition calorie targets. And then once you hit Sunday is the day that you obviously do your meal prep, and so you literally just have a day off and you just eat whatever you want. And that was causing chaos, and it still causes chaos, because a lot of the time, especially let's call them civilians, normal people who aren't enhanced athletes and competing for competitions like bodybuilding stage shows, they will completely undo all of the work that they had done during the week just by having these massive blowouts. And the other thing that comes into that, and this is just more of a Western culture thing, Saturday night is a night for getting wasted. So then people will just get absolutely trolleyed, whatever. They will just drink a lot. But alcohol has a lot of damage on the liver. It's a lot of sugar generally, and it's just a lot of poison going through the body, and alcohol has a calorie value to it. So people are then just like smashing all these excess calories into their body on a Saturday night because they've had a really well-structured week, and culturally people just go out and party on a Saturday night, and then they have their cheat day after that, so their cheat day is with a hangover. They're like, oh, well, because people have a big feed in the next morning just to cure the hangover, and the body can really, really get quite inflamed and really lethargic and bogged down from all this extra poison from the alcohol coming in, and then all the excess calories, which tend to not be what we refer to as clean calories as well.
Dirty, greasy, gluten, dairy, everything they get their hands on, and then your digestion's shot because it's trying to break down all this poison from the night before.
I remember,
it's not a good mix.
You know the term, you get the greasy food soaks up the alcohol. But I think what they were experiencing was they're just so inflamed they just can't feel the sickness. It's a very interesting. Well, anyway, we live that, and especially when you're in your 20s, you can get away with that a lot more. But especially as we start to get into our 30s and 40s and onwards, like, you have to take a lot more consideration into what your body's capable of and really work with being healthy. Otherwise, you're swimming against the current with that. So that's a bit of an idea of what the common training looks like for bodybuilding. It's very aesthetic focused. It's very region focused, as in I want my chest to look bigger, I want my legs to go bigger. And then people just cherry pick the exercises that they like the most, and they cherry pick the areas that they either want to see bigger / they feel the most insecure about. And that's how their training program is put together until they eventually get a structured workout plan from a coach or something, depending what the coach writes for them. So that is breaking down bodybuilding. Now, when we move over to functional training is a lot more open-ended because, again, as we discussed, you could be standing on something wobbly with a weight and justify it as stability training and functional training and whatever. And in some context, if you're working with a therapist to improve, like come back, rehabilitate from a particular injury, that specific exercise might actually have an application. But we need to make sure that when we're talking about functional training, we're always asking ourselves the function for what. So when we say function for what we like to go with is like, what is your body's baseline? What is your body's baseline stability needs? What are your baseline coordination needs? You need to be coordinated to do particular movements. And then we try and then show people that they can start advancing towards certain other qualities as well, such as speed, power, agility. So what we kind of have at SMA and the way we like to coach people through like 3 main phases first, which is mobility, stability, and strength. Once you've gone through mobility, which means you can move well and you're supple enough to get your arms overhead without having to compensate with the spine, you can sit cross-legged comfortably, you can do your squats and your deadlifts and whatever shoulder presses you want and hang as well without pain. You need to make sure you can satisfy those needs. And then you move into the stability needs when you start adding more weight and having more balance on a single leg. And then you move into strength where you start loading up, adding weights, and you'll see the introduction of more traditional strength training exercises come in. But then we talk about what qualities do you want? Qualities such as, do you want to be more agile? Do you want to continue to be more mobile? Or do you want to start building muscle from there? So really how functional training separates from bodybuilding is aesthetic focused. Functional training is quality focused. What qualities do you want to bring in the body? And then what movement patterns do you want to enhance as well? So then when you look at the sport, some sports are built around throwing, some sports are built around grappling, some sports are built around running. And so you start to try and optimize the person for that specific thing, which the caveat to that is, as we mentioned before, optimizing for one thing can actually de-optimize. Is that a word? De-optimize you towards another thing. And so that's another consideration. So we are talking about more global movement patterns, more bigger movements rather than isolated movements that we see in bodybuilding.
Yep.
What does a common training week look like for functional stuff, Nav? What would give me an example, maybe like a 5-day split?
Yeah, beautiful. So obviously you mentioned the qualities of improving strength, speed, power, mobility, stability, endurance. So we definitely don't shy away from cardio either because we want people to function in their everyday life. Also within their nervous system and their body, we also are aware that your nervous system and your cardiovascular system also has an impact on your muscular system. So a 5-day split would tend to look like 3 days of lifting with a couple of days of cardio, whether it's more like your zone 3, zone 4, which might be high intensity, maybe a zone 2 where you go for like a long hike or a long jog for, a good hour or two time period. So that'll be like a 5-day split.
Yep.
And those 3 days will most likely be something like full body days, because you want to hit each muscle group 3 times a week with a global movement patterns depending on their goal.
Yes.
4-day split.
Yep.
Yeah, so we'll be something like 2 strength days with 2 sport cardio specific days. The reason why we put sport there is we work with athletes. A lot of the functional stuff will be for an athlete, or it might even just be a sport that someone likes to do on the side, because a lot of people also just like to have some sort of team bonding sport, which we're big fans of.
Yeah.
Like if our clients can find something they enjoy doing with friends and family outside of the gym, it gives them something to aim towards and to strive towards as well. Maybe they actually just want to focus on getting better at their everyday movement, strength, stability, mobility. And so they could do like a 2 traditional strength day. So they could do more of the traditional bodybuilding, powerlifting lifts that will be like the big 6 movements, your pressing, your pulling, etc. And with 2 unilateral days or 2 more functional days where you might get more rotation or unilateral, maybe more jumping, sprinting, sort of like skipping practices as well. You could also look at a 2 strength day and a 2 hypertrophy day. So if you're doing 2 days of strength, which will be more focusing on lower rep ranges and your big traditional lifts, but then your 2 hypertrophy days, you could get away with maybe some unilateral movements at a higher rep range, more controlled. So then you could still get more of your functional movements, like maybe a rotating lunge or something like that involves some form of function, while also doing it at a certain rep range that incorporates hypertrophy of maybe the quads and the booty looks good, the chest looks good through some push-ups or pressing movements, or a 4-day split of like a strength day, speed day, mobility day, cardio day.
Yeah.
So we're getting a big mix of attributes here.
Yeah.
They all correspond to one another, so they all do support each other slightly in one another, but as you could tell, it's a little bit more dynamic and more variety than if someone wants to do bodybuilding and powerlifting. And a 3-day split, you could do like a push-pull legs with many unilateral rotational days within that as well.
Yeah, very well put. And listening to Nav, it makes sense, or hopefully it starts to make sense, is what we're trying to get across, is that bodybuilding and powerlifting is a lot more clearer, and it's a lot more structure, and it's also grounded in history as well, in the sport that we know so much about. But again, the functional space is a lot more open-ended, because when you are trying to be genuinely functional, you actually have to then ideally do an assessment of your posture and your performance. There's generally some sort of testing, and all high-level athletes do testing before every single program. They usually get a 12-week program, so they can work based on that quarter, and then they can work through different qualities and then test themselves afterwards. Where bodybuilding and powerlifting, yes, bodybuilding not so much. They don't have much testing. They just more, stand in front of the mirror and make their decisions based on the aesthetic. So when you are doing more functional training, it's really important to have some degree of assessment to identify how your natural resting posture is, your general movement patterns, and then you're making quite a focused plan on what your body needs to work on, whether it is mobility, whether it is stability, and then identifying that what's the specific sport that you're trying to improve at as well. Or it might not, you could say running's not a sport, but running's an action. So if someone wants to get better at running, they might have poor rotation, they might have really stiff shoulders, they might have too much of a rounded upper back or something, which means in that program you'd have to add in all these extra stuff to make the body feel better, build those foundations as well. So functional training, a little bit more open-ended, but a very worthy journey to go on, because it teaches you a lot about yourself more than, in my opinion, more than what bodybuilding does.
That's kind of like, to piggyback off of that, I had this conversation with a client the other day. The challenging aspect of functional training, or trying to create a global strength, stability, and mobility within our body, is also recognizing where we might be holding tension or movement patterns in our everyday life. And that could be quite confronting, because a lot of the time our movement patterns or our breathing patterns are quite dictated by our emotions or our feelings or our actions through everyday life, and that could be challenging for people. And it's also, a lot of these movements do tend to require a lot more mental capacity than doing a bilateral squat, and so for a lot of people it could be quite confronting. You're confronting movement patterns where you might be stuck, you're having to think a little bit more than you normally would, and you might also have some emotions or discomfort come up because you are confronting aspects of yourself.
Yeah, very good point. Now, what are some common mistakes to avoid for both bodybuilding and functional training now that when people are trying to take more action with all this extra knowledge that they've learned from our podcast? What are some common mistakes to avoid?
Well, one, ironically, I did was functional training without progressive overload.
Yeah.
I think it was two-part. I think I was learning a lot about new movement patterns, and I was really enjoying not having, per se, a program. I felt like I was learning so rapidly. You know, I'm sure you probably had the same, but there was so much to learn about anatomy and the human body that I feel like we captured so quickly that it was hard to me to really program. And so I certainly did lose a bit of progressive overload and progression in my training in general because of that reason.
Yes.
And now I'm getting back into it with proper education. I'm applying programming and progressive overload to functional training and traditional lifts at the same time, and that's working wonders. But that's certainly a mistake I made, and I can see people do the same.
I did what I'm about to say, bodybuilding without a proper foundation of movement. That's exactly what happened to me. Is I wanted to get bigger when I first started training, and then I wanted to do like handstands and get broader shoulders, and then just going straight into that work actually made my shoulders quite dysfunctional, and one of my shoulder issues took 9 years to get around, to really undo, and a lot of it was just changing my training approach because I was so fixated on that high loading on the shoulders. So really, if you do want to focus on aesthetics, that is okay, because that's a natural desire of pretty much every human, but you have to learn to do that in conjunction with building foundation. You have to learn to be patient with yourself when you focus on aesthetics, to allow yourself to build a strong and supple body, so that when you do these bodybuilding exercises, they don't ingrain in poor movement patterns. They just help you get more enhanced in size and whatever, and become more toned, but you're also learning about how to move your body and be stable at the same time. What else, Nav?
Yeah, so mixing methods without understanding the purpose, but also just cherry picking exercises depending on what makes us comfortable or what we enjoy or what looks better on the internet, but not actually applying it to what is our goal, where are we at currently, like taking an honest view of ourselves. Maybe it's an exercise you don't want to do. Maybe it's an exercise that makes you really uncomfortable. Hilariously, a lot of the things that make us uncomfortable are the things we should probably be doing.
Yeah, definitely. And lastly is just neglecting recovery in pursuit of all your other goals. It can be it's easy to feel very time poor, and we really want to have a sense of urgency towards goals, because urgency gives us motivation, but then that urgency can also make us neglect certain things. So you want to make sure that you're having some level of movement or mobility in your training, but also you want to make sure that you're resting and recovery, you're avoiding overlifting, which is a common one, and just eating shit and underhydrating, just not eating quality food and just skipping water and just drinking your energy drinks and whatever else it is. And that can be very slowing on the body. It can be damaging, but it also just slows the results down. So what about some quick wins, Nav? We want to make sure that people are taking like intelligent action towards their goals. How can someone assess like which approach is better to suit their goals?
Yeah, so if you're struggling with mobility, stability, or strength, like one or the other, like be honest with yourself and identify that. Maybe put a little bit more effort into one of those more than the other. Definitely recommend a mix of mobility, stability, strength at all times. However, play around and put more focus on progressing in one over the other, because you can't progress in everything all the time. You know, like they will meet each other, but really put a lot of effort into one. Also identify movement patterns to improve on. Same thing applies. Try to improve in all your movement patterns, but maybe put your focus on one every single day. Try and PB in that every single day for the next quarter, and then move on to other movement patterns. And same thing with the functional six, big six. Depending on your goals, what you want to achieve, depends on how much of the functional six you do and how much of the big six you do.
Very good. What about if someone's a bodybuilder, or they're still enjoying their bodybuilding type program, but they do recognize that they want to just fit in some more functional stuff? What are some just gentle tweaks that someone could have in order to make their existing bodybuilding program just a little bit more functional? Yeah,
so you could still do some, let's say, you could shift a sagittal core movement to a rotational core. So instead of always doing crunches, in a 6-pack sort of like sagittal plane movement, you might be able to do something like even a Russian twist is probably the most basic, but ideally like a contralateral rotation where you're like holding onto a cable and you're rotating all the way through. So you can incorporate rotation instead of
chops are good. High to low chops or low to
cable
high.
chops,
standing or kneeling, whatever.
Cable
work's my favorite for rotational core. Especially related to my favorite mystery item.
Favorite mystery item, damn. Because
might not be my favorite mystery item, but anyway.
Aiming for lots of unilateral exercise as well. So if you're very dominant, maybe doing leg press and you're always doing squat, leg press sort of variations, maybe do a lunge, maybe lunge with the rotation. That could also improve function while still incorporating the quads, which might be a primary goal. And you could also move away from machines towards free weights or even cables like we're mentioning, because they're slightly different to machines and involves more stability and mobility in other areas of the body while you're moving that area. Because that's the thing with machines, that isolate a certain area, but it doesn't involve the mobility or stability of the rest of the body, which is why they use it.
Yeah, good point. Now, I've got a client who they do a lot of traditional strength training and they lift a lot, and they are quite a muscular person. And now that they're having a lot of issues with their shoulders and their arms, got a bit of a nerve entrapment going on, their biggest concern is like losing muscle, because now they've spent so much time not prioritizing mobility. They've spent that much time not doing it. Now they're being forced to now overcompensate and spend a lot of time doing mobility. So what are some things that people can do to, I guess, like mitigate that muscle wastage when they're not going to be lifting as heavy?
Yeah, so if someone wants to... Should we do the camera?
Let's do the camera.
Someone wants to do the camera.
All right, we're back. Camera just dropped out. All right.
Okay. Building muscle while also focusing on movement quality and recovery, right?
Yes.
So the first thing that comes to mind is pick certain exercises that will still hit that muscle group and a certain that doesn't inflame or cause more injury. Because you will be able to find a specific movement pattern. Unless they're really jacked up, then maybe you need to just remove any sort of shoulder work at first and then try and mitigate as much damage as possible, as much muscle loss as possible through good nutrition. So nutrition's a big one. And then choose certain rep ranges and time under tension that won't inflame the muscles. So you don't have to be going heavy all the time. Maybe that individual could choose like an 8-rep scheme doing really slow, eccentric, negative sort of pattern movements. And so it'll be a little bit healthier in the joint and the muscles, but still have some form of hypertrophy. But yeah, it really depends on where they're at.
Yeah, very good. And then when would a hybrid approach be beneficial?
Oh, so when sport is in the picture?
Oh, yeah.
So if they want to perform in a sport, then a hybrid's great because you do want force output. So we're talking about bodybuilding, powerlifting, functional training. There's still, to the traditional lists that are done in bodybuilding and powerlifting, they do have benefit in regards to force output and overall strength. So still keep that in play, but the hybrid models, when you add in other rotational stuff or maybe lateral movements, so stepping side to side, rotating, throwing, kicking, because that's what the sports entail. You know, you squat in powerlifting, but you run and throw and kick in AFL. You know, so when you're doing a sport, when pain is present in the body, because if you're ignoring pain, is something I learned as a coach, I'm sure you were the same, but for a long time I was training people in these all traditional lifts, but pain was always present, and a lot of the knowledge was around reducing the load, or maybe you just change the exercise. But what we've came to realize now is you can reduce pain by actually certain movement patterns that might create more stability or mobility or strength in a sequence of movement or the collective system. So that's when it's really important, and when strength training bores you. That's what's so exciting about the hybrid model. That's what's really exciting about a variety of movements. You get variety of movement. The issue with just basic strength training, you pretty much just change up a handful of exercises per movement pattern and the sets and the reps. So you're either bulking or you're cutting, or you're trying to build greater strength or hypertrophy, and that's it. And that gets pretty boring.
Yeah, I get that. I've been there.
Yeah.
It's good to mix it up. Let's watch some videos.
Let's do it.
Let's talk about some. Actually, do you want to do yours first?
Yeah, you've already seen it. I'm intrigued by yours. So
Yeah.
all right, let's do it. I don't think there's any like audio, so we could just talk over it. So this is Edward Troyce, and we're currently watching Larry Wheels, who was a powerlifter running on the treadmill, and now Edward is showing us the difference in training styles between bodybuilders and powerlifters, talking about how he gets more fluid and explosive and strong through these movement patterns. So it just really shows that this hybrid model can leave you still being aesthetic and muscular, but with greater bracing, a less compressed spine, less pain, more movement, more agility, more capacity in our movement.
Yeah, very good. And the video, he's deliberately used that first frame of Larry Wheels running because it's actually atrocious, unfortunately. I do actually respect him for running.
Yeah.
Just to actually get on the treadmill and start moving.
Yeah.
But it's just, the stiffness is clearly there, and that's why he's used it as the first 3 seconds of his video, because that's what gets the views. People see that, and it really reveals... he looks like a fish out of water.
Yeah.
Really. You can just clearly tell he's just not adapted to running.
Yeah.
His head's very central, his shoulders are very central, and he looks like he's skedaddling a little bit rather than like a bit of running like a Looney Tunes character.
Well, I think what's also funny is, because I also experienced this when I went into power building. Power building technically is the term for bodybuilding and powerlifting, but I was somewhat delusional around my capabilities. I genuinely thought that I could go back into Muay Thai and kick ass again.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of these individuals, they probably think, because maybe to a degree they are a little bit more physically capable than people that are overweight or obese and don't train at all. So surely Larry Wheels might be able to run more than them, right? It doesn't mean it's more efficient or effective. And so he probably has this belief system that he is more functional than what he is. And I see that in the fitness space as well. So I look at someone like Edward and you go, we don't need to do that. I could run on a treadmill just fine. But Larry might not even see the differences in the nuances of the movement. He might not even notice that his trunk and his obliques and his body isn't even moving. He's not even having any lateral tilt or spiraling at all in his movement. He's so like rigid and just moving through the arms and the legs. It's very like located into specific areas. So I think a lot of people, just like if someone's never experienced being healthy or being lean, they don't even know what that feels like.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, the video that I've got is so. I've actually got two. They're of a similar concept, but one's a good example, one's a bad example. So this is also one of my favorite internet personalities. It's Sonny Webster. He's one of the ex-Great Britain Olympians for Olympic lifting. And so he's started a bit of a new phrase called tribrid. And he's just he's really got himself in shape. He's always had a bit of a gut on him, but he's always been incredibly strong, and he's built a name for him for being a great lifter. But now he's like so shredded. He's super dialed in his nutrition, and I love to see it. But now he's running a lot as well. But it's such a common thing that I see actually mostly in high rocks right now, is that people entering high rocks are people with lifting backgrounds. And I think that's fine. But what the issue is coming out of that is people are coming out of sagittal plane dominant training protocols, which is bodybuilding and powerlifting and traditional lifting, and then they're jumping straight into a new movement pattern, which is running, which is not, there is a high level of rotation that is needed to run efficiently. Yes, you can run, but run efficiently is a different thing. And Sonny Webster, he's getting all these comments and he got a bit viral on this clip because he's like running in slow motion. But it allows me to observe how stiff he is, and he's just, I guess, effectively a cleaner version of what Larry Wheels was running at. But most people,
is slightly better.
Yeah, but most people are watching this won't be able to tell how average the running form is.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to shit on him because I think he's an incredible athlete, but what I'm using this as an example of is what happens when someone that is so used to moving, when they're stiff and they're braced, they're taking that same level of stiffness and bracedness into the movement pattern, and his rib cage is just locked. His shoulders are just locked. His pecs, you can see how tight they are. His neck is super stiff as well.
Yeah.
And yes, he's moving at speed, but someone who tries to train for a high rocks or a half marathon using that technique is guaranteed to have ankle and knee and hip problems within a matter of time. It's on track. And then the next video that I'm going to bring up is actually two elite athletes that are unbelievably fast. Did they give me an error message? No. Okay. This went viral. This got over 1 million likes, I'm pretty sure. 1 million. Oh, there you go. Oh, yeah, 1.2 million likes. And so I forget where this guy's from. Some sort of like Mexican, Spanish country, one of the smaller countries. The guy at the front, someone Ortez, I think his name is. Both of these guys actually are Olympic level athletes. They both represent their countries, but why this video is so viral is because one guy, they're both running together at an amazing speed. They're like, I think they're going sub 3 minute pace, if you know what that is. But the Kenyan guy is basically taking half the cadence.
Yeah.
And the guy at the front is like grinding,
grinding,
yeah. And it looks painful. He looks like he's painful, and he's going at blistering pace. But you can see the anterior tilt in his pelvis. You can see how compressed his low back is. Yeah. You can see how uneven his shoulders are, and it's very muscular driven movement, which is why I theorize that he is only going to be really a shorter distance athlete. Whereas this Kenyan guy really looks like he could run marathons with ease because he's so efficient and he's so relaxed whilst holding the exact same pace. And again, when you're focused on the intensity side of things, these things aren't an issue. They're not on your radar. But when you're trying to move better and move without pain, you have to learn to move with efficiency and be relaxed when you move. And that's why this video went so viral, and I love to see it. I love to share it. So thanks for watching these videos with us obviously if you're watching this on YouTube as well. So look, one little just kind of like should we wrap this up?
Yeah.
Yeah. Couple of recaps with is that my laptop? I think that's my laptop. I don't know what it is. I've heard that. I hear it like once a week.
Strange. I never heard it, so it must be.
Yeah, anyway. I don't fucking know what that is. Anyway, I'm getting hacked, guys. Laptop be beeping. So, look, in summary, we've talked about the difference between functional training and bodybuilding / traditional strength / powerlifting. Bodybuilding, powerlifting, there's a great place for it. And a lot of those exercises are still featured in common functional training programs, including the programs we write ourselves as well. But what the key difference is that the mindset and the attitude towards the training. What we're trying to steer people away from is training purely for aesthetics and really allowing their insecurities to dictate their exercise selection. You can use your insecurities to drive you, but don't let them decide on what exercises you use. When you go to training, use the exercises you're familiar with, the heavy exercise, and train those same traditional exercises that you've done, but think more about what qualities they're going to bring to you. Are you becoming adequate are you mobile? So you can still train to be mobile in a squat. You can still train to be mobile in your presses because your shoulders need to be mobile, your hips need to be mobile, but you're focusing on the mobility of that. Then you want to be able to be stable in those positions. Can you comfortably sit in, for example, a deep squat? Can you comfortably hang in the overhead position? Once you have achieved adequate mobility and stability in these patterns, then you can start loading up with traditional strength patterns as well. And then from there, then you think about what qualities you want to introduce to your training. Do I want more speed? Do I want more agility? Do I want more muscle growth as well? And then from there, you're also valuing key movement patterns, things like split stances, lunges, rotational patterns, single arm loading, single leg loading in conjunction with your traditional strength training. Remember that we are human, we are bipedal, which means we walk on two legs and we walk one leg at a time when we move. And that means we're better off optimizing for push, pull, run, jump, climb, twist, roll, tumble, throw, hang, strike. All these more natural movements is what we want to continually optimize our body for, which means there always has to be a place within our training or our lives or our weeks where we are addressing those movement patterns and seeing a progression in those. Because if we don't see a progression with those, we see a regression in those, and that leads to pain and dysfunction and discomfort as well. And the first place to start that we recommend is the spine. We're very big on spine first training because the spine is the core. It houses all our vital organs, influences your head position, it influences influences your mood. And then effectively, if you don't have good spinal position, you don't have good rib mobility. If you don't have good rib mobility, you're more prone to stress, which reduces your recovery rate. You can't sleep as deeply. You're wasting a lot of energy, holding onto stiffness. And then the pelvis locks up as a result of that as well. And then when you have a locked up pelvis, you have very limited mobility, which means it's unideal or unwise to be going into heavy deadlifts or heavy squats or something when you have subpar hip mobility. So spine first training is very important for everyone, as we believe. It's important to have some clear goals when you determine how you're going to approach your training. As Nav mentioned before, is identifying what movement patterns you're not strong in, making sure that you're clear on what qualities you need to improve on, and also be okay with getting help from someone and getting that feedback so that they can work with you to work on that as well. And it's just important to understand the why. Really think about the why and really take into consideration your anatomical makeup and your physiological makeup when you are picking and choosing your goals. Mystery item.
Let's do it. All right. Swimming your way. It is a tin of salmon.
Well, hey! I might have some salmon tonight.
I've been absolutely loving these tins of salmon. It's so crazy. I used to eat a lot of fish, a lot of tuna back in my bodybuilding days. I had a lot of tuna, but the concern around tuna back then, and even today, is the amount of mercury you get from it, because tuna are big fish. They eat a lot of fish and they get a lot of mercury from that. But this wild caught pink salmon, they're very low on the list. They're very small, so I don't eat a lot of other things in the ocean like that. So I don't have any of those concerns about mercury. But something I surprisingly didn't even notice until started eating these recently is the amount of EPA, DHA in the omega-3. So when you take an omega-3 supplement, you're looking to gain, ideally you want about 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams of EPA, DHA a day. That's the goal. And so each 1,000 milligram of omega-3 fish oil supplement that you get, normally about 30 to 50% of it is EPA, DHA. So you're looking at about 300 to 500 milligrams per one, depending on the quality of it. However, this one has just pure, all the omega-3 is EPA, DHA. So one of these a day is enough EPA, DHA than if I was to have about 5,000 milligrams of omega-3s a day. So I've stopped having my omega-3 supplements and been smashing one of these a day for my protein, fats, and my omega-3. So that was just really fascinating, because for so long I've been having...
How efficienting.
How efficient is this? I've been having supplements like omega-3 to get the EPA, DHA in, especially because of tuna. I actually have a standard Coles brand tuna, but this gives you context. This has omega-3. It only has 300 milligrams in it, and it only has 200 milligrams of EPA, DHA, and it's the same size, same macronutrients.
Wow.
Crazy difference.
Wow.
So this is like 6-7 times more. The salmon's 7 times more potent in omega-3 EPA, DHA than the tuna.
Interesting.
Yeah, didn't even know that. So I've been loving this.
Interesting.
No more omega-3 supplements for me. The good stuff, real stuff.
Wow.
There you go.
I rate it.
All right, what do we got? Your favorite, maybe not so favorite?
One of my favorite. I got both of them here. I brought my rope, and I bought my my handle, which actually my PT client gave to me. So this is just it's called an Angles 90 handle. I don't even know what. Anyway, it is a handle, but it's slightly more contoured, it's slightly rounded, and it's got a little groove for your rude finger. And the other thing that's really nice about it is that the strap comes out the central part, not the wider part, like a common stirrup handle, as we call it. And I just use this for all of my cable rotation work. So it's more of a symbol for the training that I do with this. All of my unilateral pulling and my split stance work that involves a cable, I use that on the cable machine, and it just gives me a little bit of extra hand purchase, and it feels so much more nicer for me. And again, the reason it's here is because it symbolizes my enthusiasm towards specific cable rotation exercises and how that enhances the body. And then this is actually my rope, which I learnt off Edward Troyce's course, doing his rope flow. So this is a rope to do rope flow with it. I'm not going to bother trying to explain it if you haven't heard of it. For those of you who have seen rope flow, it's skipping without the jumping, which means the rope kind of figure eights around you, but it means that your body has to do more of the movement left and right to get out of the way of the rope rather than jumping over and under it. So it gives you that more of a dynamic movement protocol. But what it has done for me, it's helped me soften my spine, which has subsequently made me what I feel like an okay dancer. Because I used to be a male stripper and I used to do lots of dancing on women, and I used to be very known for being a really good lap dancer. But I had this thing that my spine would always click when I was doing lap dances, and when I was body rolling, it would just the aggressiveness of the roll. It just the back of my lumbar would click, and it wasn't painful, but I knew that would catch up to me. And doing the rope flow is learning how to stand up tall and be stable, but also be soft at the exact same time. And when I was stripping, I hated dancing, and I think it's because I was insecure about dancing, but also it just made me think about stripping. But when I was at a wedding just 2 weeks ago, we boogied on the dance floor for hours. And it was because I've learnt how to soften. And when I soften and relax while still being active, the music's easy to feel, it's very fun to dance, and that natural rhythm comes out of the body when you're understanding how to be soft but stable. And rope flow has been the tool that's helped me learn and develop how to be soft and stable at the same time. And I just wouldn't have got that if I was fixated on aesthetics and in my bodybuilding era. So that's it. That's my mystery item.
Nice item. Very good.
Thank you very much for listening. We will sign off with our final mystery sound.
Unlucky.
Sorry, everyone. Damn it.
Bleep that out.
Yeah. Hopefully the editor will bleep that one out. And then if it was bleeped, it was a swear word, it was a C word. So anyway, we're going to not do that. All right. We will see you in the next episode. Ciao. Bye.
Goodbye.